The holographic display flickered to life in the dimly lit war room, bathing the gathered officers in an eerie blue glow. Admiral James Harper stood rigid, his weathered face a mask of controlled fury as he watched the scene unfold. The Galactic Council chambers materialized, filled with alien dignitaries from across the stars. At the center stood a small human girl, Emily, just 8 years old, her eyes wide with terror. High Counselor Zex Thor, a towering insectoid with glittering compound eyes, loomed over the child. "Let this be a lesson to your primitive species," it hissed, mandibles clicking. "The Council's authority is absolute. Disobedience will not be tolerated." Harper's fists clenched at his sides, knuckles white with rage. He knew what was coming, had seen this footage a dozen times, but it never got easier. The High Counselor raised a wickedly curved blade, its edge glowing with alien energy. Emily's scream was cut short, replaced by a sickening thud and a spray of crimson across the polished council floor. The hologram winked out, plunging the war room back into darkness. For a long moment, only the sound of Harper's ragged breathing broke the silence. Then, a soft voice spoke from the shadows. "You understand now, Admiral, why we've kept Earth's true military might hidden for all these years." Harper turned to face Dr. Elara Chen, the civilian head of Project Lazarus. Her face was lined with a mixture of sorrow and cold determination. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his gut. "But why did they do it? Why kill an innocent child?" Chen's eyes hardened. Emily was part of a cultural exchange program. She accidentally witnessed a secret council meeting discussing their plans to pacify several non-compliant species. Instead of simply wiping her memory, they decided to make an example of her. Harper shook his head in disgust. "Monsters. And we've been bowing and scraping to them for decades." "We had no choice," Chen replied. Until now, she moved to a control panel, entering a complex series of codes. "The Council believes they've cowed us into submission. They have no idea of the ace we've had up our sleeve all this time." The far wall of the war room slid open, revealing a vast underground hangar stretching for miles. Harper's breath caught in his throat as he took in the sight. Row upon row of sleek, predatory ships unlike anything in the known galaxy. Their hulls gleamed with an otherworldly iridescence, seeming to shift and ripple even as he watched. "The Lazarus fleet," Chen said, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. "Built-in secret over generations, using technology reverse-engineered from the precursor ruins on Mars. Faster, stronger, and more advanced than anything the Council has. And now, it's time to wake the sleeping giant." Harper felt a shiver run down his spine, a mixture of anticipation and dread. "How long have we had this?" "The first ship was completed nearly 200 years ago," Chen replied. "We've been adding to the fleet ever since, always in secret, always preparing for the day when we'd need to defend ourselves." Harper nodded, his resolve hardening. "And that day has come. What are my orders?" Chen's gaze bore into him, weighing his resolve. "You're to take command of the flagship, the HSS Nemesis. Your mission is simple: bring the Council to its knees, by any means necessary." Harper snapped to attention, saluting crisply. "Understood. We'll make them pay for every drop of human blood they've spilled." As he strode towards the Nemesis, crew members scrambling to their stations around him, Harper allowed himself a grim smile. The Council thought they'd cowed humanity, reduced them to obedient slaves. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The Nemesis burst from its underground berth, climbing through the atmosphere with impossible speed and grace. As they breached the upper layers of Earth's sky, Harper got his first real look at the ship's capabilities. Streams of data flowed across holographic displays, showing energy readings off the charts and a hull composition that seemed to absorb any scanning attempts. "Status report," he barked, settling into the Admiral's chair. His XO, Captain Sarah Chen, no relation to Dr. Elara Chen, responded crisply. "All systems nominal, Admiral. The fleet is forming up behind us. FTL drives are spooled and ready." Harper nodded, his eyes fixed on the main view screen. The stars beckoned, and beyond them, retribution. "Set course for the galactic core. It's time we paid the Council a visit." The journey that should have taken weeks passed in mere hours, the Lazarus fleet's advanced drives tearing holes in the very fabric of space-time. They dropped out of FTL on the edges of the core systems, cloaking technology rendering them invisible to the Council's vaunted defense grid. Harper stood from his chair, addressing the bridge crew. You all know why we're here. The Council has ruled through fear and oppression for too long. They thought humanity was weak, easily controlled. Today we prove them wrong. His voice hardened, eyes flashing with barely contained fury. Today we avenge Emily and every other human life they've taken. We fight not just for ourselves, but for every species they've oppressed. A chorus of determined aye, Admiral rang out, the crew's faces set with grim determination. Harper turned back to the viewscreen, watching as the glittering jewel of the Council's capital world grew larger. Weapons hot. Prepare to decloak on my mark. The tension on the bridge was palpable as they glided past the outer defense platforms. Unseen, undetected, a vengeful ghost fleet come to extract its pound of flesh. As they entered high orbit, Harper's finger hovered over the command console. Now. In an instant, the Lazarus fleet shimmered into existence. Alarms blared across the Council world as sensors suddenly registered the presence of over 100 warships of unknown configuration. Before the defenders could even react, the Nemesis opened fire. Lances of blindingly bright energy sliced through the orbital defense stations, reducing them to expanding clouds of debris. Fighters poured from the Council shipyards, only to be swatted from the sky by point defense systems far beyond their comprehension. Multiple Council warships on approach, Captain Chen reported, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. They're hailing us. Harper's lip curled in a sneer. On screen, the face that appeared was one he recognized all too well. High Counselor Zex Thor, its compound eyes wide with a mixture of fury and fear. Unidentified vessels, you are in violation of Council space. Stand down immediately or... Harper cut the transmission with a savage gesture. Target their flagship. I want that bug's head on a platter. The Nemesis's main gun swiveled, locking onto the ornate vessel at the heart of the Council formation. A pillar of light lanced out, punching through shields and armor as if they were tissue paper. The Council flagship disappeared in a blinding flash, taking the High Counselor with it. For a moment, silence reigned on the Nemesis's bridge. Then a ragged cheer went up, quickly stifled as the crew remembered their professionalism. Harper allowed himself a small, cold smile before refocusing on the battle at hand. Press the attack. I want boots on the ground within the hour. The space above the Council capital devolved into chaos as the Lazarus fleet tore through the defenders like a hot knife through butter. Carriers disgorged swarms of dropships, streaking towards the planet's surface through gaps in the faltering orbital defenses. Harper watched it all unfold with a detached sort of satisfaction. The Council had sown the wind with their cruelty and arrogance. Now they would reap the whirlwind. Hours passed in a blur of tactical displays and status reports. The Council's vaunted military crumbled before the technological might of the Lazarus fleet. By the time the last of the orbital defenses fell silent, human troops were advancing on the Council chambers themselves. Harper stood in the wreckage of the High Counselor's office, surrounded by the broken bodies of alien guards. A squad of his best soldiers fanned out, securing the room. At the center of it all cowered a group of lesser counselors, their varied alien physiologies united in their terror. Please, one of them whimpered, tentacles writhing in distress. We surrender. We'll give you anything you want. Just stop the killing. Harper regarded them coldly, his hand resting on the butt of his sidearm. It would be so easy to end them all here, to wipe the stain of the Council from the galaxy forever. But as he looked at their terrified faces, he saw not the mighty oppressors they'd once been, but pathetic, sniveling cowards. With a deep breath, he made his decision. Your surrender is accepted, he said, his voice like ice. But understand this, the age of the Council is over. From this day forward, Earth and her colonies are free. Any attempt to reassert your authority over us will be met with total annihilation. The councillors nodded frantically, willing to agree to anything to save their own skins. Harper turned away in disgust, keying his comm unit. Dr. Chen, the Council capital is secured, awaiting further instructions. Chen's voice came through, tinged with satisfaction. Well done, Admiral. Hold position and prepare for Phase 2. Harper's brow furrowed. Phase 2. You didn't think we'd stop at just freeing ourselves, did you? There are a lot of oppressed species out there who'd love a shot at payback. We're going to give it to them. Understanding dawned, and Harper felt a fierce grin spread across his face. Aye, aye, Doctor. The Nemesis stands ready. In the days that followed, the galaxy was turned on its head. With the Council's iron grip broken, centuries of resentment and pent-up rage exploded across 100 worlds. The Lazarus fleet, with the Nemesis at its head, became the tip of the spear for a wave of revolutions. They liberated the silicon-based XT-Sha from their energy-draining slave pits on Rigel IV. They shattered the barrier reefs that had kept the aquatic Nyradal confined to their home oceans. Everywhere they went, they left broken chains and newfound freedom in their wake. But it wasn't all triumph and easy victories. The Council, while reeling, was far from defeated. Pockets of resistance formed, rallying around hardline councillors who refused to accept the new order. Battles raged across the spiral arms, the Lazarus fleet tested to its limits against increasingly desperate foes. It was during one such engagement, deep in the Orion Spur, that disaster struck. The Nemesis, ambushed by a suicide squad of Council loyalists, took heavy damage. As klaxons blared and damage reports flooded in, Harper made a decision that would alter the course of the war. All hands, abandon ship, he ordered, even as he strapped himself into the Admiral's chair. Get to the escape pods. I'll hold them off and make sure the Nemesis takes these bastards with her. Captain Chen, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead, looked at him in horror. Admiral, no, you can't. Harper cut her off with a sharp gesture. That's an order, Captain. Get our people out of here. Someone has to make sure these Council dogs don't get their hands on our tech. His voice softened slightly. It's been an honor serving with you, Sarah. Now go. Chen hesitated for a moment longer, then snapped a salute, tears in her eyes. The honor was all ours, Admiral. Godspeed. As the last of the escape pods jettisoned, Harper turned the Nemesis to face the oncoming Council fleet. His hands danced over the controls, pushing the damaged ship to its limits. All right, you alien bastards, he muttered. Let's see how you like this. The Nemesis plunged into the heart of the enemy formation, guns blazing. Ships exploded left and right as Harper's desperate gambit caught them off guard. But for every Council vessel destroyed, the Nemesis took more damage. Warning lights flashed across every console as systems failed one by one. Just as it seemed the end was near, a familiar voice crackled over the comm. This is Dr. Chen to the Nemesis. Hang on, Admiral, the cavalry's here. A dozen Lazarus ships dropped out of FTL, their weapons already firing. The Council fleet, caught between the newcomers and Harper's suicidal charge, began to break apart. But the Nemesis was too far gone. As the last enemy ship winked out of existence, the mighty vessel's reactor finally gave out. Harper closed his eyes as the ship began to break up around him. He thought of Earth, of Emily, of all the oppressed beings they'd freed. It's done, he whispered. We're free. The Nemesis disappeared in a final, cataclysmic explosion, taking its admiral with it. But his sacrifice was not in vain. The tide of the war had turned irrevocably. In the months that followed, the last vestiges of Council control crumbled. A new galactic order began to take shape, with Earth and its allies at its heart. The Lazarus fleet, its existence now known to all, became a symbol of hope for the oppressed and a warning to any who would follow in the Council's footsteps. Dr. Chen stood before the newly formed Galactic Assembly, representatives from 100 species hanging on her every word. We gather here today not to create a new council, not to forge a new empire, but to ensure that never again will one group hold such power over others. We've seen where that road leads, and we say no more. She paused, her gaze sweeping the chamber. Earth extends the hand of friendship to all peaceful species, but know this: we will never again allow ourselves, or any other race, to be subjugated. The Lazarus fleet stands ready to defend that principle, no matter the cost. As the assembly erupted in cheers and applause, Chen's thoughts turned to Harper, to Emily, and to all the others who had given their lives to reach this point. Their sacrifices would not be forgotten. A new age was dawning, one of freedom and self-determination for all sentient beings. And if anyone dared to threaten that hard-won peace, well, the sleeper had awakened. Earth and its fleet would be waiting. The story of Earth's revolution spread across the galaxy like wildfire, a tale of David toppling Goliath. On 100 worlds, in 1,000 languages, people whispered the name of the Lazarus fleet with a mixture of awe and fear. But on Earth, in a small town far from the centers of power, a different kind of memorial took shape. A simple granite statue of a young girl, her face etched with innocence and wonder. At its base, a plaque read in memory of Emily Taylor, whose life sparked a revolution. May we never forget the price of freedom. Every year, on the anniversary of the Council's fall, people would gather around the statue. They'd leave flowers, small toys, and handwritten notes, and they'd remember the spark that lit the fire of rebellion, the sacrifice that freed a galaxy. As for the Lazarus fleet, it remained vigilant. Earth had learned its lesson about complacency. Never again would they be caught unprepared. The ancient ships, once hidden away in secret bunkers, now patrolled the stars openly. A constant reminder that humanity, once roused, was a force to be reckoned with. In the decades that followed, the galaxy saw an unprecedented era of peace and cooperation. Former enemies became allies, working together to rebuild what the Council had destroyed. But the memory of those dark days and the price paid for freedom was never far from anyone's mind. And so, humanity took its place among the stars, not as conquerors, not as vengeful destroyers, but as guardians of a hard-won peace. The Lazarus fleet, born in secrecy and baptized in fire, became a symbol of hope to the oppressed, and a warning to would-be tyrants across the cosmos. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson: underestimate humanity at your peril, for beneath their peaceful exterior lay a sleeping giant, ready to rise in defense of justice and freedom. And woe betide any who would threaten that peace, for they would face not just a fleet, but the indomitable spirit of a species that had clawed its way from a single world to the very stars themselves. As Dr. Chen often said in the years following the revolution, "We came to the stars in peace, but we will fight like hell to keep it." It was a promise and a warning, one that echoed across the vastness of space, a reminder that sometimes the most unassuming species can change the course of galactic history. But the story of the Lazarus fleet and humanity's rise didn't end with the fall of the Council. In many ways, it was just the beginning. 10 years after the revolution, a new threat emerged from the depths of uncharted space. The Swarm, a hive-mind species of insectoid aliens, began encroaching on the borders of known space. They consumed everything in their path, stripping planets bare and assimilating any species they encountered. The newly formed Galactic Alliance, with Earth at its heart, faced its first true test. Would the hard-won peace crumble in the face of this existential threat, or would the diverse species of the galaxy stand together against the coming storm? Captain Maya Harper, daughter of the late Admiral James Harper, stood on the bridge of the HSS Nemesis, II, namesake of the ship that had turned the tide against the Council. She watched the tactical display with a mixture of awe and trepidation as the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history took shape around her. Sleek human vessels flew in formation with the crystalline ships of the HFY, while the massive organic hulls of the Dal dwarfed them all. Species that had been mortal enemies under Council rule now stood shoulder to shoulder, united against a common foe. "The Swarm fleet has entered the Arcturus system, her XO," a gruff HFY named Zix reported. "They'll be in weapons range in 10 minutes. Maya nodded, keying the fleet-wide comm. "All ships, this is Captain Harper. You all know what's at stake here. Not just our lives, but the future of every free species in the galaxy." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The Lazarus fleet once awoke to free us from tyranny. Today we wake again to defend that freedom. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice, we will not let the light of civilization be extinguished. For Earth, for all our homes, attack." The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries as one of the most brutal and decisive engagements in galactic history. The Swarm's biological ships crashed against the Allied fleet like a tide of chitin and acid. But for every Allied ship lost, a dozen Swarm vessels were reduced to drifting debris. The Nemesis I led the charge, its advanced weapons tearing through the Swarm's defenses. Maya's tactical genius, inherited from her father, turned the chaotic melee into a carefully orchestrated dance of destruction. species that had never fought together before found a rhythm, covering each other's weaknesses and amplifying their strengths. For 3 days, the battle raged across the Arcturus system. Planets were scarred by stray weapons fire, and the light of exploding ships outshone the system's sun. But finally, as the 4th day dawned, the remainder of the swarm fleet turned and fled, their hive mind recognizing the futility of further conflict. As cheers erupted across the Allied fleet, Maya allowed herself a small smile. They had done it. They had faced extinction and emerged victorious. But her celebration was short-lived. Captain Zix called out, his crystalline form vibrating with tension. "We're picking up a transmission from the retreating swarm ships. It's aimed at deep space." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "They're calling for reinforcements," she realized aloud. This was just the vanguard. The following months were a flurry of activity. The shipyards of a dozen worlds worked around the clock, churning out vessels to bolster the Allied fleet. Scientists from every species collaborated, seeking weaknesses in swarm biology and developing new weapons to exploit them. And at the heart of it all was the Lazarus fleet. The ancient ships, awakened once to throw off the shackles of oppression, now stood as the first and last line of defense against annihilation. Their advanced technology was slowly disseminated throughout the Allied forces, equalizing the playing field against the numberless hordes of the swarm. A year to the day after the Battle of Arcturus, long-range sensors detected the approach of the main swarm fleet. It was an armada that seemed to blot out the stars themselves, dwarfing even the massive force they had faced before. As the Allied fleet moved to intercept, Maya found herself addressing not just her crew, but the entire galaxy. Billions watched on viewscreens and holographic projectors as she spoke. "People of the galaxy, sentients of all species, I speak to you now at the edge of oblivion. The swarm comes, numberless and hungry, to devour all we hold dear. They think us weak, divided, easy prey." She paused, her eyes blazing with determination. "They are wrong. We are the heirs of the Lazarus fleet, the breakers of chains, the defenders of freedom. We are the ones who toppled empires and united a galaxy, and we will not go quietly into the night. To the swarm, and to any who would threaten our hard-won peace, I say this: you face not just humanity, not just the Lazarus fleet, but the combined might and indomitable will of every free species in the galaxy. We have tasted liberty, felt the warmth of friendship among those once called alien, and we will not let it be taken from us. So come, swarm, come and face the fury of a galaxy united. For in our diversity we have found strength, in our differences we have found unity, and in the face of extinction we have found our true selves." This is Captain Maya Harper of the HSS Nemesis, II, and on behalf of every free being in this galaxy, I say we fight, we survive, we prevail. As her words faded, replaced by the blaring of battle alarms, Maya turned to face the oncoming storm. The Lazarus fleet, once Earth's secret weapon, now stood proudly at the forefront of the greatest armada the galaxy had ever seen. The battle to come would shape the fate of countless worlds. But win or lose, the galaxy would remember this day. The day when the children of Earth, the heirs of the Lazarus fleet, stood tall against the darkness and said no further. For in awakening their ancient fleet to avenge a single child, humanity had not just changed their own destiny, but that of an entire galaxy. They had shown that even the smallest spark of defiance could ignite a firestorm of revolution. And now, that fire burned bright enough to hold back the night. As the first shots of the battle lit up the void, Maya thought of her father, of little Emily, of all those who had sacrificed to bring them to this point. Their legacy lived on in every ship, every soldier, every free being fighting for their right to exist. The swarm may have been numberless, may have conquered 1,000 galaxies before, but they had never faced anything like this. A galaxy united, standing as one against the tide. For this was the true power of the Lazarus fleet. Not just in its advanced technology or formidable weapons, but in the idea it represented. The idea that tyranny could be overthrown, that the oppressed could rise up, that a better future was always worth fighting for. As the Nemesis I plunged into the heart of the enemy formation, Maya allowed herself a fierce grin. The swarm thought they were facing a fleet. In reality, they were facing the unbreakable spirit of every free being in the galaxy. Let them come. Humanity and its allies were ready. For the Lazarus fleet had awakened, and with it, the hope of a galaxy. The sleeping giant had risen, and it would not rest until the stars themselves were safe. The battle joined, and the fate of all hung in the balance. But one thing was certain: this was no longer just humanity's fight. It was a fight for every species, every world, every dream of a free and peaceful future. And they would win. Because they had to. Because the alternative was unthinkable. Because that was what the Lazarus fleet did. It defied the impossible. It changed the course of history. It saved worlds. As the void lit up with weapons fire, Maya whispered a quiet prayer. Not just for victory, but for a future where fleets like Lazarus would no longer be necessary. A future where the galaxy could live in peace, united not by fear or oppression, but by friendship and mutual respect. That was the real mission of the Lazarus fleet. Not just to fight wars, but to make them obsolete. To forge a galaxy where the execution of a child would be unthinkable, where cooperation trumped conflict, where the diversity of life was celebrated rather than feared. It was an impossible dream, perhaps. But if humanity had learned anything in its journey to the stars, it was that the impossible was just another challenge to overcome. And so they fought on, the heirs of Lazarus, the children of Earth, the defenders of a free galaxy. For Emily. For every child who deserved to grow up in a universe of wonder rather than war. For a future worth believing in. The battle raged, and history held its breath. For this was more than a clash of fleets. It was a battle for the soul of a galaxy. And the Lazarus fleet, awakened by tragedy but driven by hope, would see it through to the end. Whatever that end might be.